So I played Resident Evil 9, and I have a lot of thoughts, and the game came out literally a week ago, something like that, something like, I don't know. If you haven't played the game and you don't want to find out what happens, leave. This is not for you. I'm going to be talking about pretty much everything that I experienced in the game with minimal context. So if you've played the game, you'll probably know exactly what I'm talking about. If not, I'm just going to name drop some stuff, some characters, and talk about some stuff that happened in the game, and you are not going to know what's going on, but it will definitely ruin some of the reveals. So just go play the game. It's good. It is expensive, and it's pretty short, but it was damn worth $70, I will say that. Anyway, so the game is kind of split up, between Leon and Grace, and there's kind of even halves to that. Like, there's a lot of Grace with a little bit of Leon, and then the second half is a lot of Leon and just a little bit of Grace. Grace's section, giving you all of, like, the survival horror stuff, is scary. Naturally very scary. The girl is the perfect stalker enemy. She's horrifying. Thank God she's blind, first off. But also her chains rattling from, like, a distance. Ugh. Fight or flight, activating my fight or flight every time. I also really liked the blood mechanic where you can like siphon the blood from different places around the map. There was a lot of back and forth trying to figure out that puzzle between the east and west wing, trying to get the quartzes to open that door. And I was constantly running into buckets and piles of blood where she just like, wow, that's a lot of blood. And yeah. So I was like, this has to be something. And eventually you get the blood analyzer and you can like pick up the blood and use it to craft stuff. So with all the back and forth that you had to do to, get all the items and kind of complete that puzzle, you could go back to all of these like places with the blood that you found earlier and you can use it to craft stuff. I just thought it was really neat to like come full circle with that. Also, I played on normal difficulty, so I know this isn't true on the higher difficulty settings, but I love Requiem. It was great. If I just didn't want to deal with an enemy, bam, didn't have to do it. One shot, pretty much everything, except like the big like chunk enemies and like the chef and all that. I just kind of avoided those. But specifically, like the screaming zombies with quote-unquote main character syndrome, I didn't have the energy for those. They got requiemed. So it was a universal experience, it seems. But yeah, getting those quartzes to open that door, the last one specifically where you needed to do the Braille puzzle. But since Grace can't read Braille, she had to go get Emily out of the cell in order to get her to read the Braille for her. I get that it's a plot contrivance, but just for the record, you can reverse engineer the Braille pretty easily to figure out what it says. So, like, she didn't actually have to let her out of the cage, but, whatever. I think saving Emily really helps Grace's character. I'm going to talk about this a little bit later. I'm just kind of going through the game right now, but Grace obviously has survivor's guilt, watching her mother get murdered in front of her. That's some pretty heavy stuff. So I think that with the whole Emily thing, it's kind of Grace kind of feels like an obligation to save Emily. Also, it was kind of sad that Grace didn't get like a final boss. But really, what could she have done against Zeno or Gideon if she got like a final boss that she had to like fight? I liked what they did with the girl. It's kind of like a puzzle boss where you have to sneak around to like activate the power in order to open this hatch that'll like bake her in the sunlight or something like that. It was a pretty good compromise because she really couldn't like fight anything, but it was only halfway through the game. By then though, it was like my third encounter with the girl and I was running through that encounter, blasting Requiem bullets left and right because I was so tired of seeing her. So the second half of the game, you get your Leon segment. There were a few Leon segments peppered in during the first half and it felt like appropriate, but when it was his turn in Raccoon City, the game went full capital VG video game and it was definitely a tone shift. There's like a computer box where you can buy like upgrades to your weapon. It literally like pulls up like the gun and like all of the attachments. It looks like the gunsmith in Call of Duty. I felt like I was playing Call of Duty for a second. So yeah, playing as Leon was fun, but it was pretty jarring. In the past games, you're pretty powerless at the start, but you slowly grow your arsenal until you're basically a walking war machine by the end. I think separating that progression into two distinct characters / halves of the game kind of takes out the subtlety of that approach. Obviously, in the other games, specifically RE7 and 8, they have like a shift where you play as another character with like a cooler gun towards the end, like the section on the boat with Mia in RE7, and that part where you're using like orbital strikes on the village as Chris in Resident Evil 8. But comparatively, it's a much smaller shift because the gameplay style isn't changing all that much, you just have better weapons. Where with Leon, you're like doing like roundhouse kicks and shit. You get like all these different guns and stuff, and that's just not something that you ever even approach with Grace. She gets like 3 guns maximum, and they're all pistols. And Leon's running around with a billion different guns and options. He can like tape grenades together just to make a bigger explosion. Crazy stuff. Makes sense why he gets the final boss. Also, the final boss is Gideon? You're telling me that Victor Gideon is the final boss and he's just some big, like, goopy guy? I definitely thought Xeno was gonna be the final boss of some sort. He's got, like, the Ultra Instinct thing going on. He looks like Father Baldur from Bayonetta, but, like, cooler. And he's got, like a weird gun that, like, blows you up. And he doesn't do anything. He just kind of stands around and like yells at Grace to type in a password. To be fair, what can you really do against him? Look at how he moves. I guess he's just gonna come back in the DLC or the next game. You know the rules of this kind of media. It's like if you don't see them die, they're probably still alive. And even if you do see them die, they still might be alive. It's kind of like a Dragon Ball rules where unless you like eviscerate them and like blow them into atoms, they can always come back or regenerate or something. I will say though, Xeno did inject himself with Elpis before he quote-unquote died, so he doesn't have the regenerative abilities of the T-Virus, so I don't really know what happened to him. I do know that at the end, the Connections, or whatever their like evil group is called, kind of came in and picked up something out of the rubble, out of the Ark, and I don't really know what that is. Obviously they didn't show it on purpose, but I guess it's DLC sequel bait. We'll find out in like 3 years or something, I don't know. But the Ark though, that was crazy, huh? That was like some of the most sci-fi stuff I've seen out of Resident Evil. And like there's always like a lab at the end of like a Resident Evil game, but it's always a little grimy. This one was like so clean, it was like really kind of like crazy. And like throughout this section, you're kind of ping-ponging back between Leon and Grace pretty consistently. And I'm glad that by the end, they gave Grace some tools to take out the powerful zombies that were just kind of stalking around. Like if I didn't have bottles of acid to deal with the crawly guys with the tongues, and I had to like hide and run from all of them, it would have gotten old. The other crazy thing about the facility is that's where we get like the huge lore drop of this game. Apparently, Grace is brought there because Xeno believes that she is the key to unlocking Elpis, which is kind of the thing of this game. The last creation of Umbrella CEO, infamous scientist Oswald Spencer. In actuality, the key to Elpis was a video file on a floppy disk that Grace's mom hid in the hotel at the beginning of the game. And all I'm saying is that I'm glad Grace held on to that. To be fair, even if she didn't have it, they weren't going to get Elpis anyway, but Elpis turned out to be a good thing, so, you know, whatever. So, speaking of Grace, she didn't make a terribly good first impression. It's kind of insane that she even has a job at the FBI. Like, she bucked up by the end of the game, but she was clearly not built for this. It's insane that she's a field agent. But the game spends a lot of time building Grace up as a character with like a mysterious past and origin. She's kind of like idolized by all of the villains in the game. Like Gideon's like, it has to be Grace. We have to get Grace. Grace! She's the key to Elpis or whatever the hell. Like, and obviously she has a visual parallel with Emily, which I was faked out by it. And I think that was the intention, for us to think that Grace is like some kind of clone stolen from Umbrella as a baby. I actually like that in the end she just turns out to be like a regular person. If she was some like special clone with like special blood that had like the key to Elpis like encoded in her or something, that would have felt like fanfic writing to me. Sure, like the ending that we got was a little cheesy, but like this is Resident Evil, it's not Silent Hill. What I do wonder about the ending is that I wonder if this is like Capcom's way of ending the Umbrella legacy, or if they're just gonna go back to some kind of other Umbrella fuckery in RE10. Because Elpis seemed to only cure Spencer's viruses. I doubt it would work on other kinds of bioweapons like the mold or Las Plagas. And there's definitely some like unanswered questions and Xeno's lack of doing really anything that leaves the door open. But I felt like this was the most like complete Resident Evil game that I've personally played. The story is tied up really nicely. The game itself is tied up thematically as long as you choose the right ending. And it's pretty obvious the game is about guilt.
I was wrong. And I am plagued by guilt.
Spencer, has his guilt for creating the T-Virus, contrasting with Grace and Leon's survivor's guilt, which from what Leon says in-game is his only driving force by RE9. I think he says at some point, like, if I can't go back and save everybody in Raccoon City, I may as well save Grace, or something along those lines. Also, that ending. This is kind of my rant a little bit, but what's with the trend in games to have an entire experience where your choices don't matter, just to have one final coin flip at the end to determine which ending you get? Like, you have to choose between, like, destruction and hope as, like, the Elpis passwords, which will, like, release or destroy Elpis. And, like, by then, I kind of got it. But it's like a reading comprehension test. Like, did you pay attention to what the game is about? Did you pay attention to Grace.mp4, where Spencer says that, like, Grace represents hope in his, like, redemption or something like that?
I took her in to make amends. She is my hope.
Where, like, if you literally play the game and you're like, I have to destroy Elpis, and you're not paying attention to, like, anything else that comes into your brain, you're just going to hit, like, the destruction button to destroy Elpis, and it kind of, like, gives you, like, the objectively bad ending. But yeah, this feels like a trend right now. Like, the most recent example in my mind is Expedition 33. Although that game does it a little bit better, and the goodness of each ending is a little more ambiguous, it's not even debate which one is good in RE9. Nor could you even debate which one is canon. It's so blatantly obvious which ending is the intended ending. Like, the ending where you destroy Elpis is so comically bad, they don't even give you a final boss. The game literally just ends after, like, a 30-second cutscene. Also, just, like, imagine that if at the end of something like The Last of Us, you get to the room with the doctor, and, like, a big prompt on the screen comes up, and it's like, press L2 to save Ellie, press R3 to let them operate. Like, what are we doing here? And just for the record, no spoilers for this, by the way. According to my reading comprehension theory, the good ending in Expedition 33 is the Verso ending, and I'm not going to elaborate on that. This was a 2025 discussion. We are in 2026. We're not talking about this anymore. That's my tangent. A little off topic, but the other thing, and this is a discussion that I'm seeing all over social media right now, and it's people complaining about the perspective you play the game in. Like, you can pick between playing Grace in first person or third person, and you can switch Leon's too, but no one's really advocating for playing Leon in first person. It's mainly the Grace thing. But first person Grace defenders are screaming that it ruins the horror to play it in third person, and the developer said it's the intended way to play. And then the third person Grace defenders are like, you can see all the nuances in her animations, there's more detail, and it's accessibility because not everyone can play games in first person. And I don't care. I literally don't care about this even a little bit. Everyone's got to argue about something. If there's an option for it, you are free as the player to pick whatever you want. It's just a game. Just as long as you have fun. Works for me. I think it was bold to contrast the playstyles like that. Albeit it is a little jarring after playing as Grace for so long. Maybe it would make it a smoother experience to play the whole game in third person. Anyway, that's the review.